For the final word in sports all across the state, you're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
We obviously drew a very tough field. Morehead State, a very, very good ball club, just beat Tennessee Tech, who was a 2 seed in their conference championship final. So they're going to be an awfully tough test. Very offensive ball club in game one for us. And then you look at St. John's. They're in it year in and year out. They've got a great ball club, and we all know how good Vanderbilt is. So, we've got a tough regional here. But we wouldn't expect it any other way.
I think we knew we were in. I think everybody that follows college baseball closely knows that we did enough. When you win 18 games in this league, you're going to be in the NCAA tournament. There's no question about it. But when you see your name up on that screen, a lot of things go through your head. You remember the first team meeting. You remember the ups and the downs, because we've obviously had a lot of those this year. So it's a culmination of that team, those student athletes, and they're getting rewarded for all their hard work. And that makes you feel good as a coach.
And a pleasant good evening to you and yours, and welcome into Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network on this Memorial Day, the 28th day of May 2018, along with Phil Kornbluth, Professor Tom Hayes, Will Pelagic, all back together again in our Columbia Main Street studios. We hope that if you did get the day off, you took a moment to think about those who paid the ultimate sacrifice today to have this day of Memorial Day. And, of course, we thank those for that sacrifice as well today. As we usually do on this day, we do have a live show because of the fact that this day always coincides with the NCAA selections. The field of 64 released around noontime today. 3 Palmetto State teams make the field. Clemson gets a number 10 overall seed. They will play Friday at 6 against Morehead State. Vanderbilt and St. John's are also in that regional. Coastal Carolina, a 15th overall seed. They'll play LIU Brooklyn. UConn and Washington will make the long trek to Conway for that regional. And the South Carolina Gamecocks, once 20-17 at an RPI in the 100s, get themselves into the NCAA tournament. The 5 straight series wins in the SEC certainly impressed the committee. They are on the 2 line at 12th overall seed East Carolina. They'll play in Greenville, North Carolina. They will face Ohio State on the 3 line on Friday afternoon in Greenville, North Carolina. The Pirates of ECU will face UNC Wilmington Corn. I would say favorable regionals for the Tigers, and Coastal South Carolina has a bit of an uphill battle for themselves.
Well, first of all, let me echo what you're saying about Memorial Day. And, of course, remind everybody, as you said, we are live, probably the only sports talk show in South Carolina going live today as we kick off what I like to call and what I have coined and registered and trademarked as mayhem. You get it? It's mayhem. You got March Madness. Baseball has May.
Yeah, but we're so close to June.
I know. We can call it the Juniper. It'll become Juniper here pretty soon. But anyway, yeah, from what you were saying, I took a look at the breakdown of the RPIs for each of the regionals. You can look at it this way and gauge the quality of each regional. Clemson's a number 11 RPI, and they have St. John's at 27, Vandy at 38, and Morehead State at 96. The East Carolina regional has East Carolina at 12, Ohio State at 37, USC at 43, and Wilmington at 65.
And USC took a bit of a dip in that RPI after what happened in Hoover.
And then your Coastal regional has UConn at 16, Coastal at 17, Washington at 63, and LIU at 214, LIU Brooklyn. You can tell us all about LIU Brooklyn since you're from Long Island and Brooklyn is connected.
I have no idea anything about LIU Brooklyn and the Blackbirds who come there. One thing, though, about UConn, though, their RPI, even though it's ahead of Coastal, they are in a similar situation with Duke. They have a ballpark that's not suitable to host a regional. So I think that because of that, that was kind of the tiebreaker. And we even saw Duke fall to the 2 line, as was taught to us by Aaron Fitt of D1 Baseball over the weekend.
So if you look at the range of RPIs, of those 3 regions, you say that East Carolina regional looks pretty tight because you've got a 12, a 37, a 43, and a 65. In Clemson's case, you've got an 11, a 27, a 38, and a 96. Clemson will play the 96 to open things up. Vanderbilt not having the Vanderbilt type of year that it's used to having. And so this is not a really good Vanderbilt team, though, on any given day when they throw one of their arms out there, they can cause you problems on the mound.
Yeah, and sometimes a guy that used to be an assistant coach or maybe even the head coach of a team, and you're in their regional, they sort of have a hex on you. So you got to watch that as well. As far as South Carolina is concerned, RPI notwithstanding, if you swept that LSU team I saw over the weekend and you take 2 out of 3 of Texas A&M, I ain't scared of nobody if you run through that gauntlet. So,
well, you know, unfortunately for South Carolina, one of the keys to those wins was TJ Hopkins.
yes.
And he is still not able to do anything right now other than play some sporadic defense and maybe even pinch run. Apparently his back issue is such that he can't swing a bat to play the complete game. And boy, they miss him. I mean, he is a spark to their offense.
Yeah, Clemson got themselves to the semifinal round of the ACC tournament over the weekend. They lost to eventual champion Florida State. I know many Clemson fans were on our feed at Sports Talk SC, and you can certainly join us if you have some qualms with the bracket, 800-956-7266. Yes, our phones do work on Memorial Day, just to prove to you that we are live. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at the breakdown from Florida State and from North Carolina, both Florida State and North Carolina went 3-1 against NC State. The fact that Clemson went 0-3 against the Wolfpack in that series, that was, again, a long time ago, you had to think that that was some sort of a tiebreak. The fact that they also went 2-2 against Florida State, if you count the game inside the ACC tournament, and the fact that Florida State went 2 out of 3 over North Carolina, that's kind of how it broke down. Florida State 6, North Carolina 7. Clemson gets a little bit of the shaft at the 10 over there.
And that's kind of bad when you think about it, because wasn't that the opening ACC series
Long
of the
time
season?
ago.
Yeah, I'm sure Monty Lee. And we've got Monty coming up live here at the bottom of the hour. We got Mark Kingston coming up live at the top of the hour.
7 o'clock.
Tomorrow night, Gary Gilmore, he asked all for tonight because they had a 14-hour bus ride back with their championship trophy from Louisiana.
So you're saying it took longer because they were toting some hardware
Yeah,
back?
well, he just said, Phil, he says, I'm exhausted. Can we do it tomorrow night? And I said, of course, sure. So we're going to have those. We're going to effort to get Ray Tanner on. I don't know what his situation is getting back from Indianapolis or if he's even interested in talking. Clemson, I don't understand. I never understand these things. I'm not smart enough. I don't have enough data. But they had won 8 in a row.
Yeah.
And they lose a 1-run game to Florida State. How do they fall as far as from the 6th line in the national seed to number 10, falling totally out of the quote national seeds, which we consider 1 through 8. We had this discussion on the website. Yes, they're seeding 16 teams, but if you listen to coaches talking today and the experts, national seeds mean 1 through 8.
Yes,
because those are the ones who will host a super regional should they advance. Clemson fell totally out of that by virtue of a 1-run loss in the tournament and a late 1-run loss to Florida State.
I'm surprised, and I know how well they played for most of the year. I was surprised to see Georgia get that seed. I thought maybe they made a mistake and they said, wait a minute, you know, the team that's about 70 minutes up the road is the one that needs the 8 seed, not the one in Athens.
Well, the other part of this that hurt Clemson, and again, so much so with the way that there's not as many people who do the bracketology situation for baseball as you do for basketball. So you're going to see a discrepancy one way or the other just because you're not looking at as many data points. But the one thing that hurt Clemson, despite all those wins, is the strength of schedule. The strength of schedule for North Carolina was 5. Florida State's was 4. Clemson's was 34. So regardless of the fact that Clemson plays in probably the tougher division of the two inside the ACC, they didn't do enough out of conference to convince the committee.
Which is kind of weird. I mean, look, they played Georgia twice. They played South Carolina 3 times. They played Coastal Carolina twice. I mean,
but that's really it.
Well, you don't have that many.
They played Coastal twice as well.
Yeah, I said that. They said
Yeah.
they played Coastal twice, Georgia twice, South Carolina twice. I guess some of the other teams that they played outside the league, I don't have the schedule open, but some of the teams they played outside the league must have just pulled them down too much.
Florida State played Florida twice. That'll certainly help theirs because that's the defending national champions and obviously the #1 overall seed.
You know what may have hurt them is the fact that South Carolina did not have the kind of RPI that you would count on them. If South Carolina had an RPI maybe in the 20s or so, it would have helped Clemson's strength of schedule RPI. And maybe that changes that argument.
Yeah, North Carolina's got a series against East Carolina that helped them as well, so who knows. And also played South Florida at a road series as well. We'll continue to break it all down and, of course, give you the full field of 64 when we come back on Sports Talk.
This is the place to talk Tigers, Gamecocks, and more. Sports talk across the state on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Welcome back, Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. Hope you're enjoying yourself. I tell you what, you get to go to Greenville, North Carolina this week, which will be pretty awesome. We'll have full coverage of that with South Carolina's game in Greenville against Ohio State. I will be at Clemson for that when they take on Morehead State. We are dispatching our good friend of the program, Alan Smothers, to be in Conway for the Coastal Carolina game this weekend.
He doesn't know that yet, by the way.
Don't care. He knows.
He knows now. If he's listening.
He knows now. They play LIU Brooklyn.
By the way, before we get into details of the regionals, I want to thank everybody for the well wishes, the cards, and the flowers after last night's loss in the 7th game between the Celtics.
I wasn't going to bring it up.
Well, for me, you know, when you lose a 7th game, it's not like a death in the family, but to me, it's like losing a pet. I feel like one of my cats died.
That's bad.
Last night.
That's
and so,
bad.
you know, I'm in a bit of a mourning period right now, but, you know, I'll get over it. The Yankees lost in 7 games in the ALCS. The Celtics lost in 7 games in the ECF. We're getting close. I'm just, my dream is to have the Corn Sweep, which is owning the World Series trophy, the Larry O'Brien trophy, and the Lombardi trophy, all in the same calendar year.
Now, I wonder if you can go to Vegas, what you could get on the Packers losing in the NFC Championship game.
Probably a lot right now, because I would do well.
That would probably be
if Rodgers can stay healthy, you know, now that he's got himself a woman to keep him healthy, maybe that'll help.
We will bring you now.
We're talking about a real woman in Danica Patrick.
We are bringing you the Field of 64 on the road to Omaha here. We will start in Gainesville. Number 1 overall seed is Florida, defending champions. They will take on the 4th-seeded Lions of Columbia. No, not those Columbia. The Columbia out of the Ivy League in a 1-4 matchup. Jacksonville and Florida Atlantic meet in the 2-3 matchup there in that regional in Gainesville.
All right, in Stanford, California, Stanford's the number 2 national seed. Will play Wright State, the team that played at Clemson last year, so they're heading out to California. Baylor is your 2 seed, and Cal State Fullerton the 3.
And that, by the way, keeping in mind, that is the regional that is paired with Coastal Carolina. They would have to make a very long trip to Palo Alto if the Cardinal come out of that regional. In Corvallis, Oregon State, the 3rd overall seed. They will take on Northwestern State out of the Bayou. LSU will also make that trip. Maybe they can split the fare up there to the Beaver State, and they will take on San Diego State in the 2-3 matchup in Corvallis.
Don't think the NCAA is not thinking about putting them on the same plane.
Oh, I bet you they
Save
are.
money.
I'm just saying.
The Oxford, Mississippi Regional, Ole Miss, the number 4 seed nationally, and will open up against St. Louis. Tennessee Tech is the 2 seed. Missouri State is your 3.
Fayetteville, Arkansas is where the 5th-seeded Arkansas Razorbacks at Baum Stadium will open up their regional against Oral Roberts out of Tulsa. Southern Miss and Dallas Baptist, as we mentioned, a very big seed out of the non-power fives. That is a very dangerous team, and maybe one that could maybe get out of Fayetteville if they maybe get the cards playing right there.
In Chapel Hill, the Tar Heels, the 6th seed with North Carolina A&T. Their opponent in the opening round, Purdue, is the 2, and Houston's the 3.
Tallahassee is the 7th-seeded Florida State regional with the Seminoles after winning the ACC championship. Also, keep in mind, this is the regional that is paired with the Clemson regional. Winner of this regional will take on the winner that comes out of the upstate. Florida State will play Samford in its opening contest. And then the 2-3 is a very cheeky matchup, Mississippi State and Oklahoma.
That's an impressive regional.
It's very nice.
That looks like an impressive regional because I can tell you from following the SoCon, Samford's pretty good. They can swing it.
And Oklahoma's no slouch either.
Athens Regional, the Bulldogs slide in there as the number 8 national seed. They get Campbell, the Camels, the Big South champions in the opening round. Duke and Troy, the 2 and 3, meeting in the other game.
And you have to feel like Duke kind of feels a little snake bitten by the tourney committee themselves. Maybe they take a little bit of an edge going into Athens this week. Going up the bracket the opposite way, Texas Tech, the 9th seed, they will take on New Mexico State in Lubbock, Texas. Louisville is the 2 seed in that regional. They will face the Golden Flashes of Kent State.
To the Coastal Carolina regional now.
Do you want to go all the way up to
I'm
Clemson?
sorry, we were going down?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, you went to the top.
Yeah.
Okay. The Clemson regional.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Clemson regional because I switched pages. Clemson regional. Tigers are the number 10 national seed. They'll open up against Morehead State. Morehead State, the 4th seed in that regional. Vanderbilt, the 2, and St. John's, the 3.
And those top 3 teams for Clemson, by the way, the same 3 that met there last year, Clemson, Vanderbilt, and St. John's, although as Monty Lee told us earlier today, really doesn't mean much as far as that goes from year to year.
Tigers and Vandy played 3 times in that regional. Vandy won the first meeting, knocked Clemson in the loser's bracket. Clemson had to fight its way back, beat Vandy. Then they had the ultimate showdown game that Vandy won to advance.
The Stetson Hatters in the 11th seed, they get a national seed there for that. They will take on Hartford in a 1-4 matchup. South Florida, Oklahoma State, the other 2 there.
All right, in Greenville, North Carolina, I'll be there with the Gamecocks covering them. It will be the number 12 national seed East Carolina as the host and the number 1 seed in the regional. They'll play Wilmington, UNC Wilmington in the opening round. USC and Ohio State at 2 o'clock on Friday. We'll talk more about that matchup in a moment. The Gamecocks at 2, the Buckeyes at 3.
Heading to the number 13th seeded Austin, Texas. The Texas Longhorns get a national seed. They'll take on 4th seeded Texas Southern out of Houston, Indiana, and Texas A&M, the other 2 in that regional. And you can see here, by the way, that the NCAA does have a sense of humor pitting Texas and Texas A&M in the same regional.
Absolutely. By the way, the winner of the Greenville regional goes to Fayetteville, Arkansas, in all likelihood. So the Gamecocks have been out there before. And, they took 1 game out there against Arkansas.
They played 3 very good games and had some tough luck of the offense there.
Right. And then they played Arkansas in the tournament this past week.
Yes.
Didn't go well. Minneapolis, Minnesota. Minnesota, the Gophers, the number 14 national seed, number 1 seed in the region, will play Canisius. UCLA's the 2 and Gonzaga. This would be an excellent basketball regional. Yes. UCLA the 2 and Gonzaga the 3. I didn't know the Zags played baseball.
Richard Pitino and Mark Few would have been there. Maybe UCLA as well. To Conway, where Coastal Carolina will host a regional. They are the 15th overall seed. They will take on, again, the Blackbirds of LIU Brooklyn. UConn and Washington will have to make the very, very long trip from Seattle all the way down to Conway. That's the 2-3 matchup, UConn and Washington.
You're a Washington kid. You're like, Conway, South Carolina? Where the heck is that?
They probably told them Myrtle Beach. That's what they told them.
Well,
because they don't know better.
Hey, here's an alert. Don't think you can walk from the coastal campus to the beach. Okay, no, it'll take you about 2 days.
Somebody I know who went to Coastal told me Conway is not Myrtle Beach.
No, it is not.
No.
It is in Horry County, however.
It is.
And finally, little surprised here, especially, this is respect to Coastal and maybe a lack of respect to NC State considering the year they had, though they kind of floundered a little bit towards the end. 16 national seed is NC State in the Raleigh Regional, #1, and they'll play Army in the opening round, and Auburn and Northeastern, the 2-3 there. So that is the breakdown of how things shape up for the NCAA tournament. Just a little bit more as South Carolina prepares to take on Ohio State in its opening game, and just taking a look at some of the numbers for Ohio State. Now they're 36-22 overall. They were 14-10 in the Big Ten, and did some damage in the Big Ten tournament. That probably is what helped get them into the tournament. But just an overall view of them, at least looking at their numbers, pretty good offense with a 287 batting average, not a heck of a lot of power with 40 home runs. They don't steal a lot of bases with 39. Their defense is pretty porous, 92 errors, a 958 fielding percentage. On the mound, the Gamecocks probably will see the guy who has been their Friday night starter, and that has been Connor Curlis, 7-4, 3.81. Here's where you got to be concerned. If they get the lead late, Ohio State, they have a closer by the name of Seth Kinker. He's got 15 saves, 1.49 ERA, a 6-1 record, 59 strikeouts in 60 innings.
A quick word on Clemson's opening opponent, Morehead State. They would not have been in this tournament if not for winning the Ohio Valley Conference tournament, beating heavily favored Tennessee Tech, who had been coming in basically as the team that many people thought would be the one bit out of that league. They were 48-9 on the year. They upset them in Oxford, Alabama to win that tournament and get themselves into the tournament. Their RPI, as Corn mentioned, is 96. That would not have gotten them into the tournament if they not win that tournament. So a little bit of a surprise there for that team.
Their numbers aren't very good across the board.
No, they are not.
We're going to find out more about them coming up.
We will talk to the head coach of the Clemson Tigers, Monty Lee, when we come back. We are getting some news in here that we want to at least pass along our condolences to a couple of members and brethren of the industry. Mike McCormick and Aaron Smeltzer of WYFF-TV unfortunately passed away while covering a news story involving a storm up in Polk County. It happened on Highway 176 when they were covering rain impact in that area. And so we certainly wish our condolences to them. We transition so dutifully, though, to the head coach of the Clemson Tigers, Monty Lee, who joins us now on the phone to talk about his team's NCAA tournament regional. Corn.
Yeah, it's some tough news to pass along there. Coach, how are you?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you?
We're doing great. And while we have you on and we're thinking Clemson, let me mention your golf team is at in 13th place in the tournament, still on the course, 12 shots from the cut line. So looking kind of tough there for the Tigers in the golf tournament out in Oklahoma. But the baseball Tigers, well, how you feeling? I mean, you got the home regional again. You see Vanderbilt again, St. John's again, but the number 10 national seed. Does that stick in your craw a little bit? Were you expecting to be in the top 8?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't stick in our craw, as you say, at all. I mean, look, there's a lot of things to be grateful for with our program right now. And anytime that you can host a regional, it means you've had a great regular season, and we certainly have. You know, we're the only program in the Carolinas to host a regional in the last 3 years consecutively, and we're one of only 4 programs in the whole country to host a regional in each of the last 3 years. So we're very grateful for the opportunity to host a regional again. We're excited about the field that we have coming in. It's going to be a tough regional. When you looked at our resume, we felt like we had a chance to be a national seed. But as I said earlier today, you know, that's not up to us to make that decision. And I'm sure that the committee had some tough decisions to make when you try to compare the resumes for, you know, number 6 through number 10. I'm sure it was very difficult to try to come up with, you know, with those decisions. But we're excited about being a host and having the opportunity to play here at home again. And, you know, we look forward to getting started on Friday.
All right. So you're not buying into the internet website conspiracy theories, Ray Tanner out to get you?
I don't buy into. Here's what I buy into: just control what we can control. That's it. I don't get too concerned with that. You know, our goal is plain and simple. Whether we were a national seed or not, you know, our goal is to win a regional here at home. As happy as we are and as excited as we are and grateful as we are to be able to host a regional again here at Doug Kingsmore Stadium, we all know that in the last 2 that we haven't been able to advance out of our own regional. So, you know, our goal right now is just to focus on having a great week of practice, trying to prepare our guys for this regional. It's going to be very tough to do that because we have so much rain in the forecast. We were inside today. Looks like we're going to be inside probably for the next 2 days, maybe even on Thursday. So just trying to get our team on a field to be able to practice is going to be a challenge. And then we got to focus on Morehead State in game 1 because they're a very dangerous club. So, you know, all the other stuff we're not really worried about.
Yeah, I always I don't envy you guys when you see that name come along and then you all of a sudden have to talk about the team. You've had a couple of hours. What more do you know now about this team out of the Ohio Valley Conference, Morehead State?
Well, we know a little bit about, you know, I know Coach McGuire. Coach McGuire was an assistant at Winthrop for a long time, did a great job there. Moved on and was at Lewisburg Junior College, did very well there, and now he's at Morehead State. So he's a winner. He's been a winner wherever he's been, and he's certainly got Morehead State going in the right direction. They've won 37 games. They're hitting .317 as a team with 83 home runs. So they've got some power. They're a very physical ball club. I think they had the nation's leader in home runs last year in Nico Holsizer. He's been injured some this year, but he's still got 12 home runs and 160 at bats. So they've got some power, and they're a very, very offensive ball club. So that's going to be that's a pretty scary matchup for game one, just facing a team that could swing the bat like that. And then you look at Vanderbilt. We all know how good Vanderbilt is. They play in the SEC, and Coach Corbin is one of the best in the country, and they've won a national championship there. And we've got St. John's, who's in the NCAA tournament. It seems like every single year, and their pitching staff is phenomenal. They've got a 2.95 ERA as a team, so it's a tough draw, but that's the way it's supposed to be. I mean, that's what being in the field of 64 is all about.
Coach, I got to tell you, a classic battle you had with Florida State. I have to congratulate you. Showed a little fire that night. As far as that's concerned, that was a tremendous game. But tell me this: as far as now getting to your regional, and you talked about not being able to get out of your home regional for 2 years. Do you have a conversation to your team about, we want to concentrate, we want to play the best ball we can, but don't go out on the field pressing?
Yeah, and that's a very, very fine line, and that's very difficult. I think that's the biggest challenge that us as head coaches run into is, when you get into the postseason where every pitch matters, every play matters, is trying to get those guys to enjoy it and play as pressure-free and as loose as possible. That's a tough line, to cross. So it's a balancing act for sure. I think, the teams that win regionals are not always the best teams. It's the teams that play the best. And that's the bottom line. We've got to be, regardless of who's the best team in this regional this year, it's the team that plays the best that's going to win it. So, we've got to continue to pitch well, to fill up the strike zone. We got to play great defense, and we've got to hit with runners on base. I think that's the biggest key for us. We've got an explosive lineup. It's a big inning oriented offense, but we've got to be able to do the little things. We've got to be able to get bunts down. We got to be able to move runners, and we've got to get runners in from third with less than 2 outs. We've got a 2-strike hit. We've got to do all the little things that it takes to win some low-scoring games, because typically you're going to face better pitching staffs, and runs are going to be a little bit harder to come by when you're playing postseason baseball.
With Monty Lee here on Sports Talk, what's the injury situation for you with your guys, and what are your pitching plans for game one?
Well, we haven't made a decision on game one yet. We're going to go through the process of looking at Morehead State. We've got some video that we need to watch on them, and just kind of analyze their lineup and try to figure out what's the best matchup with our starters, against their lineup, what puts us in the best position. So we'll probably try to make that decision possibly tomorrow or Wednesday, as far as who our starter in game one is going to be against Morehead State. So that's we've got a lot going on right now. I've been watching some video on them this afternoon, but just trying to break down the whole field in general and see what we feel like is the best matchups pitching wise.
Will Kier Meredith be available?
That's a good question. Kier actually swung the bat some today. He stayed back and rehabbed last week. He swung the bat today, just some light hitting, nothing major, nothing overly taxing. We will have to see how he progresses throughout the week, and we'll try to make a decision on him, possibly by Wednesday or Thursday. We don't have to submit our 27 active roster until Thursday, so we'll give him a couple days just to see how he feels and see if he is going to be available. But he is a question mark right now.
And the most important injury, what's the status of your clipboard?
My clipboard is completely fine. Actually, when I threw it, the thing that as I was running out there, I was more worried about our equipment manager, Mike Wilson, because when I threw it, it actually almost hit him. I was worried about when I was running out to argue with the umpire. I was like, "Geez, I hope I didn't hit House." That's his nickname, House. So I was more worried about House than I was. I knew it probably wasn't going to work out with me staying in the game at that point. But I was more worried about House, and I didn't hit him, so I felt relieved afterwards.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
Welcome back, Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. We're brought to you by the South Carolina Pork Farmers and their Checkoff Pork, powered by soy, and also by the folks at Founders Federal Credit Union. Visit foundersfcu.com to see how they can assist you in all of your financial needs. You know, it's weird how things that happen can kind of get buried and backlogged as a result of the weekend. We had some stuff that probably would have been better as a Friday news dump come out on Thursday involving the Jim Sturk, Dawn Staley news. But a real Friday news dump in recruiting is South Carolina got probably one of the biggest recruits it's gotten under Will Muschamp.
No question about it. The word came down, gosh, just moments after we went off the air. And really, unless you were there at the spring game or you had some inside knowledge, it was coming down with Zach Pickens. You didn't know that he was going to announce after his spring game on Friday. He'd given no indication. His previous comments were that he was going to wait until after his senior year and into the next season. But he went ahead and ended it right then and there on the field at TL Hanna. Big pickup for Will Muschamp if you go by the write-ups and the high school accolades and what you see of him to this point in time in his career. Big kid, defensive end who moves extremely well, can rush the passer, can fill the middle of the defensive line as a run stuffer, versatile enough to play several positions on the defensive line. Yeah, you talk about big. I mean, this is really defensively speaking, just based on everything about him and accolades, not quite as big as the Clowney signing several years ago because he was, quote unquote, the number one guy in the country. And I guess he went on to prove that in time.
Now is not Muschamp. That's
yeah. I'm just talking about as far as the program.
Yes.
But for Muschamp, yeah, this is, I was thinking about it. I mean, they've had some good signees in state in recent years. Brunson's a heck of a player. Edwards is a heck of a player. Shai Smith is coming on. He got Joyner in this past class. He's gotten some good in-state players, but this, if you just go by offers and if you want to live by the ratings, then this guy's at the top of the list.
And, of course, the perception, because the two programs nearest to you have dominated you in Clemson and Georgia, and to take a guy that they want, that gives you added credibility.
One thing I like about this kid from talking to him, I asked him about the comparisons to Clowney that are inevitable, and he said, to be honest, I would love to be compared to Clowney. I actually watch all of his tapes and try to do similar stuff that he did. I would love to be compared with Clowney because Clowney's a freak, end quote. He made several visits to USC during the recruiting process, most recent for the spring game, and that gave him the feeling that it was the right place for him and the place where he felt really at home. Now, he did say that early on in his recruiting, his 8th grade year, when Clemson got on him, that the Tigers were out in front for him. They recruited him early and recruited him hard, and they always showed him around the campus when he would go there to visit. But as he said here, he said, quote, I guess actually just growing up and seeing how many people just going there and then just kind of just fade away. That's word for word what he said. So I think maybe looking at some of the other defensive ends that they've signed and how deep they are there and on the defensive line, maybe he thought it would be best to try someplace else. Plus the fact that South Carolina's Muschamp recruited him personally and made him a primary target of his own.
I read where apparently Brett Venables went up there to that spring game and brought the entire contingent, Farrell, Wilkins, Lawrence, Austin Bryant, all of them up there. And then he goes and commits to South Carolina.
Well, I'm telling you, this is a big win for Will Muschamp.
That's a dude right there.
This is a guy that Clemson wanted, and Will Muschamp beat him head-to-head in state for a top player. There's no other way to say it.
And then, of course,
you can't spin it any other way.
And of course, Clemson fans go on their message boards and say, "Oh, that kid must not have been all in."
Yeah, obviously he wasn't, but he's all gas, no brakes.
Of course,
is what he is.
So
anyway, he says he is going to Carolina. There's no switching. I asked him if it's a long way to signing day. He said there'll be no switching. Sign in December. He hopes to graduate early, but that's unresolved right now.
We don't recommend, by the way, if you're on 26 or 20 or 95, we do not recommend all gas, no brakes. Use the brakes when needed, especially in this rain.
Now, USC and Clemson recently offered offensive lineman Hunter Rayburn, 6'4", 310 of Pensacola. Clemson is much more involved with him apparently than USC is at this point in time. The Tigers have also offered his teammate, offensive lineman Adrian Medley, and the two of them plan to visit Clemson next month. Offensive line coach Robbie Caldwell was by the school a couple of weeks ago for an evaluation, and then Jeff Scott came through and made the offer. And so he said it was huge to get the offer. USC did the same thing. Line coach Eric Wolford was by for the spring game and then offered a couple of days later, but he says he hasn't talked as much to South Carolina, and he said that he does not really have a relationship there. So it's more Clemson with him between those two at this point. Also, Florida, Texas, Mississippi State, and Central Florida are his top schools, though he says he's still pretty much wide open. USC Saturday played host to 2020 running back Trenton Simpson of Charlotte for an unofficial visit. The Gamecocks offered him last month, and Saturday he met up with recruiter Bobby Bentley and got a close-up look at the program. He's a big kid, 6'2", 205. Also has offers from North Carolina, Colorado State, and Charlotte, plus interest from Virginia Tech and NC State. He said USC's in good position with him after the visit. Clemson offered defensive lineman Enoch Jackson, 6 feet 290, of Mansfield, Texas. Now, before the offer, he had tweeted out a top 6 of Georgia, Oklahoma State, Iowa, Texas Tech, Ole Miss, and Arkansas. Clemson in the final 8 with offensive lineman Devontae Dobbs of Detroit, with Southern Cal, Michigan State, Georgia, Oklahoma, Auburn, Ohio State, and Florida State. In the top 5 is Clemson with tight end Hudson Henry of Little Rock, Arkansas, with Penn State, Wisconsin, Stanford, and Arkansas. That's important, of course, because also late in the program on Friday night, we learned that Luke Deal from Emerald, tight end, committed to Auburn. And Clemson for 2020 defensive end Desmond Evans of Sanford, North Carolina. Basketball, USC offered 6'7" Andre Hyatt, White Plains, New York. He was in the 19 class, but moved up to the 18 class. He's not sure if he'll sign now with a college or go postgraduate for a season. Vandy, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Pitt, and Texas Tech, some other offers. And 2019 6'5" Wendell Moore, Concord, North Carolina, has set officials to NC State August 31st and to USC September 8th. He disclosed those dates in a Rivals interview last week at the Nike EYBL event in Atlanta. He also has Duke, North Carolina, and Wake Forest in his top 5, and he'll take officials to those schools as well. And, of course, the very, very sad news over the weekend on the hardwood at I think it was an EYBL event. It was some kind of an AAU event.
Yeah.
Young man playing for a team out of North Carolina, out of the Charlotte area, collapsed and died on the court. And that was, of course, heartbreaking to hear that. So we've had some tough news here the last couple of days.
Yeah, his name was James Hampton, player out of Charlotte, playing again in Virginia, playing for Team United, class of 2019 prospect. He's only 17 years old, an unfortunate thing. Certainly, we pass on our condolences to them. It also, as we come throughout this week, we are 2 days away from the deadline to withdraw from the NBA draft, and still no word yet on South Carolina's Brian Bowen. So right now, it's starting to get nervous, I think, over there in Frank Martin's camp.
Yes, great point. I'm glad you brought that up. Of course, things happen at the 11th hour, and he can always go right up to the deadline and make the decision. But
I wouldn't feel good if I was South Carolina.
Right now, you wouldn't feel good?
No.
Yeah. I haven't felt good from the get-go, to be quite honest with you, going back before all this came.
I'm not saying that because I know anything. I'm just saying that just because based on all the stuff that's around.
But what does he do now, though? Because he's already been almost.
You don't work out for as many teams as he did,
but that's the key. I would think right now he's thinking undrafted free agent because nobody thinks he's going to get drafted.
How about overseas?
But he'd play. He'd still play. He can play somewhere. He does not know whether he can play on the NCAA.
That's correct.
That's the problem.
That is correct.
He will play somewhere. This is not a situation like with Silva or with any of these other guys who might not necessarily have a spot. There'd be a spot for Brian Bowen. It might be on a G League team. It might be on a team overseas. It even might be at a prep school. But I tell you right now, he does not know whether he has a spot at South Carolina.
Well, at some point in time, somebody's got to disclose why this took so long. Why this thing has dragged out to this point.
Because the NCAA is a bunch of crooks.
Well, besides that, we need to know facts.
I would go ahead and go and play with G League or whatever, and then file suit against the NCAA while I'm doing it.
We'll talk to Mark Kingston, South Carolina baseball coach, about his team's regional in Greenville, North Carolina.
2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Welcome back, Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network, on this Memorial Day Monday, the 28th day of May, 2018. Will Pelagic, Phil Kornblut, Professor Tom Hayes with you, and of course Brian Leonard behind the bulletproof glass, turning the dials for us here on this Memorial Day. Again, we thank those as only we can, just by saying thank you to those who have families with people who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our country on this Memorial Day, and we continue to honor those who have served, as we do every day here on Sports Talk and South Carolina Radio Network. We talked earlier with Monty Lee, the head coach of Clemson, on their team regional. We now have the Gamecock head coach talk about the Gamecocks regional coming up in Greenville, North Carolina.
Indeed, indeed. Mark Kingston joining us here on Sports Talk, and what a way to continue the first season at the helm of the Gamecocks, getting them back into the NCAA tournament in a year in which at one point it looked like that was the last thing that was going to happen for this team. But the Gamecocks managed to have the best record in the SEC in the second half of the season. That had to impress the committee, and won a game in the SEC tournament, and now they move on to East Carolina as a number 2 seed. And Coach, well, congratulations on what you guys have accomplished thus far, and I know you hope to do much more, but was there a point in time in the season where you thought this might be out of reach for you, considering the record and the health of your team at that point?
Well, after that, when we got to the point where we were 20-17, I think we definitely knew we were out of mulligans, and it was either put up or shut up time. And luckily, we all rallied together. We figured some things out, and as you mentioned, we became one of the better teams in the country the second half of the season. So a lot of ups and downs this year, a lot of things we've had to deal with on and off the field. So the fact that we were able to have that celebration today, where we knew we were in the NCAA tournament and we could all kind of watch that selection show together with our fans, very satisfying moment today.
Who took the team by the throat at that point? Was it internal? Was it some senior leaders? Was it coaching staff? Who took charge and kind of got this thing turned around?
You know, I think it was all of the above. I think everybody kind of had to push their chips to the middle of the table and say it's time to be all in or get out, and that's what we did. We made some adjustments on the field. We made some adjustments off the field, and it was like I said, it was one of those defining moments where either it was going to be one of those seasons that you just write off, or we were going to try to write a heck of a story. And to go from 20-17 to a 2 seed. And playing as well as we did, I think that team, that group of players in that locker room deserves a lot of credit.
I know you said after the tournament, or after your stay in the tournament was over, Coach, that grind prepared you to play this upcoming week. Though I almost would take it a step further. I think the mentality of having to have played the last 5 series in the SEC with your back against the wall, knowing you need to win that series in order to get to where you are now, how much does that experience help you come this weekend in Greenville?
Well, I don't think we should be overwhelmed by anything at this point. Obviously, in Greenville, they're going to have a big fan base there, big crowds, and big, loud, obnoxious crowds. And I heard their coach ask their fans to create a hostile environment this weekend. So that's what we're expecting. You know, now you go on the road to Texas A&M, you go on the road to Arkansas, you go on the road to Vanderbilt. You're used to tough environments to win baseball games in. So I think we'll be prepared. It doesn't guarantee anything, but we have been through the pressure of having to win big series on the road for the last 6 weeks, and these kids have come through time and time again.
Hey, the Missouri AD's on line 1 trying to reach the East Carolina coach about bringing up hostile environments. That's not a healthy thing to talk about in today's world.
Well, I'll leave that up to other people at this point.
Well, tell us this. Obviously, T.J. Hopkins with the back issue. Are there any plans to use him even in a limited basis? And if there's any chance that he'll wake up one morning and that back will be fine?
Well, at this point, we'll we'll go into the weekend saying we'll use him at minimum in the same role we did in the tournament, meaning he can come in for defense late in the game. He can pinch run. But we're also going to be cautiously optimistic that his rehab will continue to progress, and maybe we can get, maybe a couple starts out of him. So, at this point, TJ wants to play very badly. He wants to be out there with his team. So we're at the mercy right now of our athletic trainers and our doctors when they give the go-ahead that it's okay for him to play.
Mark Kingston, USC coach, with us, looking ahead to Ohio State, 2:00 on Friday at East Carolina. Ohio State, you look at some things on the stat sheet. One thing jumps out at me is the 92 errors, 958 fielding percentage. Is that something that you just sort of write off because maybe they played a lot of games early in some bad weather and tough conditions, and that played a part in that number? Or from what you've been able to gather, are they just weak defensively?
Well, we haven't been able to dive into those numbers that much. I saw that fielding percentage as well. One thing I think you have to keep in mind is, as a Northern team, you play a good number of games on the road early in the season. And when you practice indoors, as an Ohio State would need to do, you're inside on turf all the time. So when you have to play on the road early, you're getting outside on grass and dirt for the first time. So I would guess that has something to do with it. We haven't had a chance to dive into why they have that type of fielding percentage. What I can tell you is it's still a pretty darn good team that needs to be taken seriously.
When you got three other teams in the regional with you, Coach, what kind of challenge is it not only for your coaching staff, but also for the staff at large to try and make sure that the players compartmentalize, hey, this game is next, we'll worry about the next one coming in, but in order for your coaching staff to get a plan for each team, if you have to face each of them?
Yeah, well, the difference between this weekend and the previous 14 weekends for us is that, when you go into, let's say, a Vanderbilt, when you go on the road to play Vanderbilt, you take one file with you. You take the Vanderbilt file of scouting reports, of charts, of fielding, positioning, etc. When you go into this tournament now, we'll take three files. We'll take the Wilmington file, we'll take the Ohio State file, and we'll take an East Carolina file. To me, that's the biggest difference. Our players need to be focused on Ohio State, period. And we've talked about that all year. Our job as coaches and players is to make sure we're prepared and focused on the next game. When that game's over, then you turn the page and you move on to the next one. But our players right now need to be focused on Ohio State, period.
Do you have to be careful with this Ohio State pitching staff in that if you're trailing late and they bring in Seth Kinker, it could be very tough just based on his numbers, 15 saves, 6-1, 1.49 ERA. Have you had a chance to kind of break him down a little bit?
Well, he's clearly a dominant closer. So when you face a team with a dominant closer, that's on you to try to get an early lead so that he's not a factor in the game. So it'll be up to us to make sure we pitch well enough and score early and often enough so that if they use him, it's not to close the game out. It's just to try to keep a game close. So that's important. When a team has a dominant closer, you need to try to make sure that you minimize his impact on the game.
Anything else health-wise outside of Hopkins you need to tell us about?
No, I think it's status quo as far as the rest of the team is. Hopkins is obviously the big one that everybody wants to know about, but past that, I think we're status quo.
And I know you guys talked today. Are you ready to name a starting pitcher for Friday?
Not yet. I know you'd love to have that scoop. And as every other radio and TV station wants that scoop.
Nah.
I'm not quite ready to name that. I'm sure you have a lot of guesses.
Well, will you tell us before you tell anybody else? That's our biggest question.
Just text us. That'll be fine.
We won't tell Ohio State now. They don't listen to us.
I'm sure you won't tell anybody.
Thanks so much for the time, Coach. Safe travels up to Greenville. I hope you're able to get some practice time outside this week.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. We actually practiced in the football facility today for the first time. So that's a beautiful facility, by the way.
I'm glad you got a chance to check it out.
Yeah, that was my first time in there, and I was pretty impressed. So, that being said, I hope we don't have to go back in there because we want to be in Founders Park for practice and then get on the road and win some baseball games.
Thanks for the time. Good luck this week.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Those are the words of Mark Kingston, head coach of South Carolina.
First time over to see the football practice facility. That's tells you how involved he's been with his baseball program.
That's called taking a bunker mentality.
Or either you
We'll be back on Sports Talk.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
You want to read what you just read to me?
Do you want me to read what I just read to you?
Read on the air what you just read to me.
Well, Mark Sturgis, who hosts a show in the upstate, friend of ours, and hopefully doing well because he had some major surgery, tweets out, so if Ray Tanner is admitting they messed up on some seeding and where teams are going for a region, then he shouldn't have this job again. Own it. Don't apologize for it.
I don't see where he said that.
I don't know. I'm just reading the tweet. Maybe I could not hear. I was at the USC announcement, so to interview Kingston and Stokes after the viewing, so I couldn't hear. I know Ray was interviewed on ESPNU, but I couldn't hear it.
And I watched it. I don't remember him saying that. And again, we hoped to have Ray on the program, but he is currently in transit to the SEC annual meetings in Destin, and from what we understand, had to do a little bit of a detour, which made him have to drive through subtropical storm Alberto in the lower parts of Alabama and possibly Pensacola. Like doesn't they have these meetings in Destin? They just had that subtropical storm there. Don't they think to like move those maybe?
Guess it's too late. And I think they get a discount at the Destin Inn.
Because they do it there every year, don't they? I believe.
They get a family and friend discount.
Just put it in Atlanta. They should just move them up to Atlanta.
Whoa,
people out of.
Do you know what they are? They're in meetings maybe 10% of the time. You know where they are the other 90%
on Atlanta,
in the bar and on the beach.
Yeah.
And maybe not necessarily. Well, probably in that order.
You're not going to be on the beach in the subtropical storm. You saw that.
This weather's going to be a mess. Here moving forward. Gosh, after sitting through what I sat through at the SEC tournament last week, with games starting at 11:30 and midnight,
you had a lot of dead time.
A lot of dead time. I don't want to see that.
Well,
there was it was Holbrook's first year when the Gamecocks played in the Super Regional in Chapel Hill, and it was rain delayed like 3 days. I was there to like Tuesday. I think we wrapped that thing up.
Well,
maybe it was Monday. I'm exaggerating.
Don't tell Gary Gilmore that a rain delay is not a good thing.
Well,
true that.
Well, here's the other thing. Like going back to what Sturge, and I'll be respectful about this, what Sturge said, looking at these regionals and looking at at least the top 16, I mean, it really goes kind of right by the RPI. I mean, Florida, Stanford, Arkansas is down a little bit from where their RPI is. Oregon State kind of gets pushed up. Ole Miss is kind of in the same area. Chapel Hill, Tallahassee. I mean, I know people are griping about Clemson, but Clemson's right in line with where their RPI is. Their strength of schedule did not help them. And I hate to say this, but the sweep against NC State, if you look at the way the other two teams that are seated ahead of them, North Carolina and Florida State, played against NC State, that common opponent, they played better. They were 3-1, both of them. Clemson was 0-3.
Well, I don't know what you have to do if you're Clemson and your Monty Lee when it comes to scheduling. I mean, they brought in Dallas Baptist for a 3-game series as an RPI booster.
Right.
And Dallas Baptist 40-19 with a 36 RPI and in the tournament. But I guess the good is offset by a William and Mary team that had a 242 RPI, and a Wofford that had a 91, and a Michigan State with a 192, and a Charleston Southern with a 255. That offsets the Coastal Carolina games and the USC games and the Georgia games, which were all high RPI games. Kennesaw State a 120, Presbyterian 276. I mean, do you have to eliminate those kind of games from your schedule? But then again, who are you going to play? Because you just can't play top 50 RPI teams every Tuesday and Wednesday.
Well, again, I think, and there are even some schools that don't even leave their state. I mean, at least they went to Georgia for a couple of games and did that. Mm-hmm. So it really kind of depends. 800-956-7266. You want to update the golf real quick?
Let me update the golf real quick because it's getting late. Clemson now tied for 13th. In fact, the Tigers are done. They finished the day at 16 over par, 30 over par for the tournament, so they're not going to make the cut. Right now, it is the cuts at plus 16. Oklahoma State, Duke, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Auburn, Alabama, and Texas all stand to make the cut. Kent State could slide in there with a big finish. That's the only team that could slide in there. As far as Doc Redmond goes, his last event as a Tiger because he's turning pro. And he finished, Bryson Nimmer finished or is in 7th place for the Tigers right now. And Doc Redman is tied for 15th after a 76 today. I believe he birdied his last hole, according to Tim Beret. And so he finishes back in the pack a little bit. And Nimmer today, where'd it go? I just had it. Nimmer had a 78 today. So the Tigers obviously didn't have it today. I think from what I read from Tim, it was going to be a very windy day in Stillwater, and scores were going to be higher.
Let's go to Dan, who's calling us in Charlotte. Dan, you're on Sports Talk. What's happening?
Phil, I watched the whole show today, and Ray Tanner he never said that he made a mistake. He mainly, in a nutshell, they asked him about Kentucky, and he said, basically in a nutshell, they put an emphasis on your conference schedule, and they finished 13 and 17.
Mm-hmm.
But Ray Tanner never said that he made a mistake because I watched the whole show.
I wonder if he made that comment somewhere else. Didn't Matt Connolly talk to him from the state?
I didn't see it in those comments either.
Yeah, so I
no,
mean,
he didn't. Phil, let me ask you a couple questions, then I will I'll let you go.
Yeah.
Do you think in the South Carolina 2018 baseball recruiting class, they will lose any of their players to Major League Baseball, specifically Owen White and Josiah Seitler? What do you think?
Well, I'll be honest with you, and I'm not going to blow smoke at you. I'm no expert on the high school guys. Like a John Whittle could sit here and tell you much better than I. But Owen White, the right-handed pitcher, is certainly one of the highly acclaimed members of their class. And so I guess he is one that you're going to have to keep an eye on. And the thing is about the draft, I mean, there's so many picks, 50 rounds. You don't know when you think a guy is safe and not going to be picked. All it takes is one scout to like you, one scout to send in a report and say, we got to take this guy, and they pick him. So I can't honestly answer your question with any knowledge because I don't know. But from what I understand and what I've read, White is probably the top guy in their class right now as a potential decent pick in the baseball draft.
I'm still I can't figure out what he's talking
about.
What he's talking about. Like this. And again, I see really no qualms with any of this. Like, I mean, maybe you could make a claim that some of the other schools that might have deserved national seeds could have gotten them, but I think the order in which they are placed, I think is fair. And I mean, think about this of where the top 8 are, at least from that standpoint. You got 4 teams from the SEC, you got Florida, you got Georgia, you got Ole Miss, and you got Arkansas. And then you have 2 from the ACC, 2 from the Pac-12. And there's 10 teams from the SEC who made it. I mean, it breaks down basically proportionally to where the teams basically place teams inside the entire tournament.
Of course, now, we're influenced by what we see from D1 Baseball and Baseball America and the RPI. Okay, now, Clemson's RPI has been stuck on 11 for a long time. That thing hasn't moved one way or the other.
Part of it is the strength of schedule, unfortunately.
But we read in Baseball America or D1, whatever it was last night, that Clemson's going to be a 6 seed. They project Clemson as a 6 seed, hosting da-da-da-da-da. They also had South Carolina playing in Coastal, and I was saying thank you very much.
Yes.
So we don't know. Of course, the committee's got different data and different ideas. And the thing that got me, as I said at the outset of the program, the fact that Clemson had won 8 in a row and
had 19 out of their last 22.
And had that tough loss to Florida State. But maybe the committee never had Clemson on the 6th line. Maybe they never had them that high. We don't know that. We're just guessing based on what we read.
I never underestimate, even if a person is an expert in doing all their due diligence of looking at figures, the power of suggestion, to me, is underestimated. And all we've been hearing all year, the ACC is down. The ACC is down. The ACC is down. Is Clemson getting penalized for all this power of suggestion?
Well, that's what I said there in Fit yesterday. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Everyone said the ACC was down because people had been saying the ACC was down. And, whether or not it's down or not, I guess it will be borne out by what we see over the next couple of weeks.
Here is a quote from Ray we'll read when we come back.
That could be potentially enlightening. Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. We're brought to you by the South Carolina soybean farmers and their checkoff. Visit them online, of course, at Pork Powered by Soy, and also at Founders Federal Credit Union, foundersfcu.com, to see how they can assist you in all of your financial needs. You had a quote from Ray that might be along the lines of what our friend Mark Sturgis from the Upstate is talking about.
Well, maybe. I don't know. This was in Matt Connolly's story. I'm not sure if he talked to Ray or if this is what Ray said on the broadcast after the field was announced, but he said, quote, "We spent so much time trying to sort out from where we started 6 and all the way to 11, talking about the seeds. Clemson was very much in the conversation. Top 50, they were a little bit light, but it was so close. It was razor thin throughout the process, and we landed with Clemson being slightly outside the first 8 that went in. It was almost like you could make an argument for 11-6 and 6-11. There were factors that came into play, but none of them were major. It was really, really, really close. You know, somebody might have had more top 50 wins, and somebody's strength of schedule might have been different. It wasn't clear cut. There were some factors that were so close, and the committee ended up, the final hour, we ended up making a decision to vote a particular way. And like I said, there's 9 other votes besides mine, and that's the way it shook out.
There's only one team that has a worse strength of schedule than Clemson of the national seeds, and it's Coastal Carolina. But the thing about Coastal Carolina, what did they do? They won their conference regular season, and they won their conference tournament. That's what got them the national seed.
Well, I think Coastal Carolina is being
bus ride.
justifiably rewarded for what they accomplished this year. And plus, they have some marquee non-conference wins. You go back and look at their early season games in the various tournaments they host, baseball at the beach and the like. They got some very significant wins there, including wins over Ohio State. They got a win over Clemson. They've got wins. I don't have it right in front of me.
I'll take it back, actually. Stanford does have a lower one, but they, again, I think they won their conference as well with Stanford, did they not?
They did.
Okay.
And North Carolina, they beat North Carolina. So Coastal, I think, is very deserving of getting the seat it got, and also the right to host with that beautiful stadium that, if you haven't been there yet, boy, people are coming in for that, are going to just going to admire what the Chanticleers have, not only in their playing facility, but their batting cage outside. They just got a whole nice athletic complex they have rebuilt right inside the campus.
Plus, so much of this particular situation is you have to dominate. You need dominating data points. That's the only problem with Clemson, is that their dominating data points are their overall record and their conference record. They don't have a dominating data point with their strength of schedule, and with the common opponents, you could have had a dominating data point if you beat Florida State. And again, while it sounds cruel to say that a one-run game, which made you even with one opponent, that could be something that takes you out of being a #1 national seed, or at least being a top 8, national seed. It might sound cruel, but then again, that just tells you how thin the margin for error is with something like this.
Well, if I'm Clemson, you know what? I'm not worrying about this.
Just go win.
Yeah, you go win, and then if you have to go to Florida State to play in the Super, you know that's a team you can beat. You know that home teams can lose in regionals and super regionals, as Clemson has proven the last 2 years in regionals. So you just go down to Tallahassee. If you get there, you know this opponent extremely well, and just try to play your best baseball.
That's the part of it that I think they got a break on. They got an opponent, if they go down there, it's one that they know well, one that they just played. I mean, in my mind, if I'm Clemson, I am thrilled to death with this draw. In a manner of speaking.
In a manner of speaking.
In a manner of speaking. As much as one can be thrilled to have to go to South Alabama, Tallahassee,
That's
Florida.
why when you look at these projections
Hopefully
from
the storms
these
will be gone.
websites, when you look at these projections from these websites, you have to look at it, with a careful eye, because it doesn't mean that Clemson was going to get a national seed, but it suggested that very strongly.
So looking at, I do want to at least spend a moment on Coastal, because I feel like we have not done so yet, and we're going to have Gary Gilmore, Coastal Carolina's head coach, on tomorrow. We were supposed to have him on tonight in this space, but he decided, or at least asked for us to try and do it tomorrow, because of the fact that they are a tad fatigued coming back from Lafayette, Louisiana, after a 14-hour bus ride back from the Bayou with, again, as we said, the Sun Belt Trophy hardware. They played the Blackbirds of Long Island University out of the Northeast Conference, 31-24. Their RPI is a robust 214. Well, they got themselves in thanks to winning the conference tournament, though. They beat Wagner, Bryant, and then Wagner again. Wagner, who was an RPI of 75, 38-18, the top team out of that conference, but they went undefeated in the Northeast Conference tournament in Norwich, Connecticut, and so they get themselves in via that. They have in their regional a Connecticut team who had a very strong RPI, but did not necessarily have a very ample hosting resume because of their ballpark, similar problem to what Duke has. And Washington, who hasn't been nearly as strong as they have been over the years, an RPI of 63, but they get in as a Pac-12 at large.
Yeah, and the weird thing, and I know this didn't happen, but it looks like the committee sat there and said, "Whoa, forgot to put Washington somewhere," and they stuck them all the way across the country.
If you're Washington, so they're going all the way across the country to play at Coastal as a number 3 seed, and so you look at Stanford and say, okay, who's the number 3 seed there? Well, it's Cal State Fullerton. So they kept a West Coast team there. You're probably right. How about in Corvallis, San Diego State? So they had to send a West Coast team somewhere because the only West Coast locations are Stanford and Corvallis, right?
Yes.
So they had to go somewhere. The next closest place they could have put them would be, Austin or Fayetteville? Fayetteville.
Lubbock. They could have put them in Lubbock.
Is that west? Yeah, that's more west, isn't it?
Yeah.
They've got Kent State there.
But
they could have put them there and put Kent in Conway. That would have made
it a lot
more
easier
sense logistically speaking.
But sometimes logistics just hurts you as far as matchups are concerned. Because I remember the time everybody argued, why did they send Virginia all the way to San Diego? And what do? They ambush Strasburg and win 1-0, I think, in that game. So sometimes it's good to have that kind of bi-coastal flavor in the tournament.
And now in the Pac-12, just to remind folks who don't realize, they do not play a conference tournament in the Pac-12. So they were playing series all the way up through this weekend, and they ended up beating Stanford 2 out of 3 in their ballpark, number 2 seeded Stanford, by the way. They beat them in the first 2 games, 7-0 and 4-2. This came off of a weekend where they beat Utah in a sweep and also won 2 out of 3 from UCLA. So, and also 2 out of 3 out of Arizona State. So they're on a recent run of play where, while they haven't necessarily been strong, they're only 30-23. They have, very much like the Gamecocks, they could become almost like a Gamecock-esque type story because of series wins against Washington State, Arizona State, UCLA, Utah, and Stanford, each of their last 5.
All right, let me give you a few little baseball notes here. The rankings this week: Baseball America, Clemson 7 and Coastal 13. Perfect Game has Clemson 7 and Coastal 20. Collegiate Baseball has Clemson 2.
Stop.
Coastal 17 and USC 19. Now, around the states, RPI, of course, only 3 schools are still playing. Clemson's 11, Coastal 17, USC's 43. College of Charleston, 67. And, of course, over the weekend, Chad Holbrook got a 5-year contract extension.
Yes, we had been hearing some chatter about him in Kansas State. D1 Baseball was kind of reporting it, and we find out basically late in the weekend that Holbrook gets a 5-year extension. I don't know why he would have wanted that job, to be brutally honest with you. I really don't know.
Who would want to leave Charleston for Manhattan, Kansas?
And someone was saying, well, he could have maybe made anywhere up to maybe twice his salary. And I said, what does $400,000 mean for you in Manhattan, Kansas? You could buy the very nicest shack in Manhattan, Kansas, and still not be up to the poorest house you could get in Charleston.
Well, and plus,
I've been in Manhattan, Kansas, and I've been to Charleston, and I'm telling you, Manhattan is no Charleston.
His boss at College of Charleston is an old teammate, good friend, and he picked him up when he was down. He owes that guy, some loyalty, and I think he decided to, if he were talking seriously about Kansas State, I think, 1 year, you don't want to become a vagabond coach.
Right.
And why not show some loyalty and build something? And they improved, I think, 8 games this year compared to last year.
And ask Frank Martin how they pay the coaches at Kansas State.
And of course, he stays in his recruiting footprint. Sometimes you go out to Kansas, you're going to try to pull a guy from South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia to come to Kansas.
Wofford 91, Furman 151, Winthrop 200, Upstate 230, Citadel 244, Charleston Southern 255, and bringing up the rear, Presbyterian at 276.
We'll move some other odds and ends and close up shop on this week, or at least on this day, and get you ready for the week.
Wish it was the week.
We got a long way to go, Sailor. Sports Talk.
These guys, they never sleep. Check them out on the web at SportsTalkSC.com. Now, more of Sports Talk on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Did also want to pass along senior for the Gamecocks, for the Clemson Tigers, Chris Williams, named one of the 4 national players by Collegiate Baseball on Monday. He went 7 for 10 in the ACC tournament. Also was named to the all-tournament team. 3 homers, 2 doubles, 10 driven in, 6 runs, and 4 walks. Had an on-base percentage of .786. Had a 3-run homer in each of the 3 games, and reached base via a hit or walk in 11 of his 14 plate appearances.
So, how did you enjoy the ACC tournament as a whole? Not just the setting of the park, but the way the event was run and just the overall feel of being there.
I'll tell you this about the ACC, and just this is stuff that only we care about and people who listen don't really care about. But just when we're there, we want for nothing, which is fantastic. I mean, it's the best run baseball tournament I've been to, and I've done the Hoover thing like you have, and I've done the Big 12. This is by far the best baseball tournament that is out there, and I can even say that even going up to the basketball as well. That just having done the SEC and the Big 12 both, they're very well done with their their winter and their spring sports championships for those two. Not that the football isn't good. It's just when you go to the SEC championship in Atlanta, that is like the big one, if you know what I mean. That's almost like going to a national championship from that perspective. But it was fantastic. The venue is great, and I know that folks were talking about because they have it for another year in Durham, and they were talking about, will Charlotte bid for that, or would Greenville, South Carolina bid for that?
Myrtle Beach.
It was supposed to be in Myrtle Beach.
Yeah,
a few years ago.
Really?
Yeah, it was set for Myrtle Beach a few years ago.
In Conway. Or
no,
at the
Pelicans Park.
The Pelicans Park.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, and the flag. Was that when the flag nixed it?
Yeah.
And then when the flag came down, we all thought, okay, all these ACC things can come to South Carolina, and gradually they will, but not baseball yet.
I don't see any reason to move it away from there. I mean, we were talking about this over the weekend. What's to say that the ACC just doesn't say, you know what, we want to create a permanent place. It's very easily accessible for most of the baseball playing schools in the conference. And when you think about it, they have the logistical ability to make things happen. The things like that we need to make things happen, enough space and all that stuff, and internet and all the things. And for the fans, there's enough hotels in the surrounding areas. You got you got Chapel Hill, Raleigh, and Durham to be able to draw hotels from. There's stuff to do around there. They had a nice little fan fest with food trucks and nice craft beer scene, which I kind of partook in a little bit.
See, I wouldn't have noticed.
I know, right? But from that perspective, again, there's stuff to do. I don't know if, not to say that Greenville couldn't match that. It's just I don't know if they have the same combination of logistical things in Greenville and in Charlotte. Charlotte maybe a little bit, but again, their ballpark is not. Again, it's not equipped, because basically what they do is they take one of the home plate suites and they turn it into the media room. And, these minor league parks, they don't have media rooms like college baseball parks have, where they have a huge area. So they have to kind of improvise. And Charlotte and Greenville, we've done those for Gamecock and Clemson games that are neutral site games. You go up to those parks, and they're not outfitted for that.
Well, for me, the SEC tournament just sucked. No, it did. It was. I've been covering the SEC tournament for, I don't know, 20 years or so. I've been going to Hoover. Hoover's great, and that is a destination for SEC. They don't talk about the tournament. They talk about getting to Hoover. And so they've done that with the SEC. But my goodness, you cannot be starting games at 11:30 Eastern time for Eastern zone teams, or even teams from the Central time zone. I mean, it's just – for the people hanging in, even a 10:30 Central start at the pace those games are going was going to guarantee you a 1 or 1:30 finish, which is what we got on Tuesday and Wednesday nights. And that's just not that's not a lot of fun, to be honest with you. But the games of the SEC, I don't know about your games. While I was there, and I left after South Carolina lost, I left the next day on Friday. It just seemed like they were just dragging, and the replays were just slowing everything down. Was that just me, or was that true?
It's true.
It was true. It felt long, and I mean, I don't think any of the games and even the ACC, where you're supposed to play 3, I don't think any of the games stuck to its original start time. It was either either a couple minutes late or in some places an hour or so more late just because of the replays or stuff like that. And again, the ACC has it a little bit easier because they're playing 3 games in a day. But the thing you trade out for that is that you get 8 of these games, 8 of the 12 games are basically
meaningless.
Yeah. And I think
at least every game in the SEC tournament means something.
Well, in the SEC,
trying to stay alive.
Well, in the SEC, it just means more.
It just means more.
But I thought they were going to pull it off. See, because to me in baseball, especially in the SEC, LSU is the one team that treats the baseball tournament the way Duke and North Carolina treats the ACC basketball tournament.
Right.
If we're struggling, we're going to do it at the tournament, and they darn near pulled it off again. But that Ole Miss team is just good.
The one thing I would say is disappointing, and this was something that was brought up by another media member who shall remain nameless. Clemson probably had the biggest contingent of people there, of those covering it.
Even the you mean media people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean,
well, it's no surprise. I mean, look how many websites cover Clemson, not to mention the newspapers.
But I'm just saying they had more people there than I think even the
South Carolina will have more.
The local
at East Carolina.
The local triangle people. But I'm saying by the time we got to the weekend, it was Pittsburgh, Louisville, Clemson, and Florida State. The only people left in the press box were me and the Clemson guys. We left the media room after Clemson's press conference. Mike Martin and the Florida State contingent went into an empty room.
Yeah, I mean, people outside of the state of South Carolina, when it comes to college baseball, there's very few states that cover their baseball teams like the media in this state.
And the fan base demands that.
Yeah, I think so. The interest level and the success level does demand that, and we make no apologies for that.
No,
baseball is big to us here in South Carolina.
Well,
it has been for a long, long time.
I'm not saying it isn't. I lament that it's not taken as seriously elsewhere because it's fun to cover.
Well, it should be taken seriously, especially in the state of Florida when you got the defending national champion in the story. And every time Mike Martin takes the field, there's a story.
And the dude's got the all-time wins lead.
Exactly.
And he can't get anybody in there to ask him a question. Come on, man. NBA playoff game 7 tonight.
Oh, not another game 7.
Who do you got? I
don't care.
You got the Warriors. You got
basketball's over as far as I'm concerned.
You got the Rockets. What
basketball ended last night for me at about when did that fourth quarter begin? About 10 o'clock.
I didn't say anything to you last night.
I'm going to say this.
What's that?
The block on the dunk by LeBron was a foul. It was all hand, no ball. Yes, it was all. Go back and look at it. I went and replayed it last night. It was all hand, no ball. And that
wait a minute, hold it. Hand part of the ball now.
No, this was clear.
Hand part of the ball.
He actually pulled the hand down off the ball. That's a foul.
Only
LeBron gets away with that. LeBron gets that.
They won by like 12.
That's
yeah, but that was during a period of time the game was still in flux, and it could have turned back our way to the good guys.
I don't know. Not the way those guards were shooting last night. They were atrocious.
I say Boston was throwing up more bricks than we see over here in the arcade.
They got caught in the moment. That's what happened.
Except for Tatum. Tatum looked big. He looked big out there.
How about him barking and woofing at LeBron after that one dunk?
Loved it.
That was pretty.
Had me fired up.
That was pretty.
I was fired up.
Yeah, but you don't poke the bear, please. Don't.
LeBron kind of turned and looked at him like, "You talking to me? You talking to me like that?
Don't poke the bear."
Well, I'll just say this about the Celtics for all the thousands of Celtics fans in mourning tonight. We went farther than was expected, considering the injuries we suffered this season, and we will
home court advantage.
Be back. We'll be back.
The two teams,
number 18 is still within reach.
The two teams you got to watch for if they can stay on an even plane. Of course, Boston is going to be dangerous when they get healthy, and we'll see what maturation process that the 76ers have overcome.
It's all about where LeBron lands next year.
So tomorrow we'll hear more from Mark Kingston and Monty Lee. They'll have press conferences. We'll bring them to you. We're also going to hear from Coastal Carolina head coach Gary Gilmore, and we hope to have Ray Tanner on to explain to us where many believe he erred, I guess.
I don't know.
I don't think he erred.
Yeah.
But we'll ask him whether he thought he erred. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your Memorial Day. Sports Talk.